What's good, y'all? I'm Dolo. I talk about basketball, and I don't know if anybody else in the NBA community or in the basketball watching community in general has been experiencing this, but I just feel like I'm having like really, really bad like deja vu. Like something about this MVP race just feels like, I don't know, something about it feels familiar, like we've been here before. I don't know. I'm probably just tripping, but here we go. The 2022-2023 season just ended a couple of days ago from the time that I'm recording this. And now that everybody, now we're moving on from the regular season, the talks about, MVP. I mean, they've already been kind of, like, I can't even say, talks can finally come to a fever pitch because they've been pretty fervent, really, honestly, since the beginning of the year because of the story that, Jokic might go for 3 MVPs in a row. I mean, the MVP conversations is they've been going crazy all year, but now we finally have, everybody's full sample size, everybody's full body of work from the 2022-2023 season, and we can finally sit down without not any speculation, but, there's not going to be a lot of speculation in these conversations. We can base a lot of these conversations in historical and factual precedent. And from there, we can have a real conversation of who is your MVP for, the 2022-2023 season. The past 2 years, it's obviously been Jokic. He's been, phenomenal these past 2 years. I don't know if there's an adjective that exists that can describe how well Jokic has been playing basketball over the past 3 years. We can include this year too. He's been just, from an analytics perspective, he's been historically great. From an eye test perspective, he's just been, it's incredible that, you'd think that he's had like a fully healthy Nuggets squad for this 3-year stretch, but he really hasn't had a lot of Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. as of lately. I'd say probably over the past like 15, 16 months, 17 months, he hasn't had a lot of his other two co-stars. It's largely just been him, which is why his on-offs look so ridiculous. But I think, and I have been really, really big on Jokic since probably about like 4 or 5 years ago. I have been like a big Jokic dude, and every time the conversation came up, Jokic or Embiid, I would always say, even when it wasn't popular to say that Jokic is as good as or better than Embiid, I would always pull for Jokic. I would always say I don't even think it's close who you take, not because of talent, but just because of availability. I do think Embiid is like in a vacuum. I think Embiid is the better overall player. He's much more of a two-way guy than Jokic is. He's obviously way more defensively capable than Jokic is. But my knock against Embiid and for Jokic, my argument for Jokic has always been, I mean, he's not that much worse than Embiid overall, and he's going to give you 7 to 12 more games a year than Embiid. It's like, why, it's like, what are we talking about? Like, why would you even, how is it even like a conversation? Once you stop talking about, because you don't play basketball in a vacuum. So once you stop talking about the conversation like basketball is played in a vacuum and you come to reality, my take has always been, if Jokic is gonna give you, 7 to 12 more games over Embiid, it's like, what's the conversation here? What are we even talking about? There's other spots on the roster. You can draft, you can roster build for Jokic's defensive liabilities, for most of Jokic's defensive liabilities. And he's just a more complete player than Embiid offensively. It's, for me, these past 3 years specifically, I have been a big Jokic dude. I feel like this year, I feel like it has to be Embiid, personally. Like, and don't get it twisted out, I mean, Jokic hasn't been terrible at all this year. He's essentially been like right on track with the past 2 years. But a big thing for me, like this year was, and like I'm such a stickler. Like my biggest thing will always be, are you there for me? Like when I call your number, especially in the playoffs, especially in the playoffs, especially in, MVP voting doesn't account for playoffs, but just in general, my I guess kind of my like mantra, or I don't know how to put it, but like my thing for players is the thing that I look at is just like, how often are you there? How often are you like in the game playing? I always say availability is the best ability. And so that's why over the past 2 years, 3 years, I've been just like, it's Jokic is the MVP. I'm taking Jokic over Embiid. He's the better. He's not the better player in a vacuum, but like in reality, where we play basketball, I'm gonna take Jokic because he's more durable and it's not that much of a fall off in terms of overall talent. You're getting. You could argue more offensive production than Embiid as far as, for Jokic, the argument for Jokic. And like I said, you roster build and you scheme for Jokic's defensive liabilities. So I said all that to say I've been a big Jokic guy these past 3 years. But I kind of want to say like these past 2.5 years, because it was like after the All-Star break, I started like, I was watching, how this race was, taking shape. And I feel like after the All-Star break, Embiid kind of started like shifting. Like before the All-Star break, I would have said like, oh yeah, I'll take Jokic is the MVP. Like he's probably going to win, it's his third MVP this year. I feel like in November, Jason Tatum was my MVP just because he had that crazy string of like 40-point games. I think it was like 6 or 7 40-point games or something crazy like that. I'm not really sure, but yeah, in November I was saying that like, oh, Tatum is making an argument for the MVP, but for most of the year, before the All-Star break, I was saying, yeah, that like with exception to the month of November, I was saying like, yeah, Jokic is the MVP. He's probably gonna, he'll probably win his third in a row. He'll probably win his third in a row. But after the All-Star break, I feel like Embiid started to kind of like shift the narrative a little bit with how he was playing, particularly the month of March. For me, at least, that was like a big, like Embiid like physically grabbed the narrative and like pulled it in his favor in the month of March. He had a crazy month of March. And then in April, at the very beginning of April, I think it was like April 5th, I don't know. It was at the beginning of April, he had that 50-point game. Pretty sure that was on Boston, and he won the game. He dropped 50 because everybody else was really not playing great in that game. So he literally just like took it upon himself to like drop 50 on a top 10 defense and beat Boston. And for me, like that was the moment for me where I was just like, oh, this dude is definitely the MVP. Like there's no way this dude is not the MVP. I mean, on top of the year that he's already averaging, off the top of my head, I think 33 and 10 with 5 assists on crazy efficiency. Not to say that, Jokic hasn't been doing the same thing, but I don't think Jokic has like a statement game like that this year. Like he's probably got a couple games where he probably has that one. He probably has the one against Utah, or he doesn't have like that real sting. Like and like for Embiid to I mean, the 76ers, again, they were not playing offensively really well. They were really all struggling. And for Embiid to essentially just say to a top 10 defense, like, I'm just going to win the game. Like, I'm going to do all the scoring, and I'm going to be effective on the defensive end, too. You can send you double teams, send whatever. I'm going to pick the double teams apart. I'm still getting 50. Like, for him to, like, that's, like, and also, like, the MVP, I mean, all awards are really, like, super narrative-based. So I feel like, quote-unquote, like, statement games are obviously, like, they help in terms of, they help you win narrative-based awards because, when you have a 50-point game on a top 10 defense this late in the season, it, like, helps craft your narrative. If I'm making sense to the people who are listening, but yeah, no, I just think like Jokic don't really have a game like that this year. And again, Jokic has had a phenomenal season. I think Jokic is almost at a triple double. I'm pretty sure he's close to averaging a triple double on like 70% true shooting or something really weird, something alien, out of this world like that. But I think, and this is another reason why I wouldn't give the MVP to Jokic this year. Obviously, there's only been one other dude in the history of this game that's won 3 MVPs in a row. That's Larry Bird. And I feel like if you're going to go for 3 MVPs in a row, that third year, you need to leave no doubt. Like, you need to be the MVP from the beginning of the season into the All-Star break and then to the end of the year. There needs to be absolutely no question about it. Like, there needs to be no debate from the starting gun to the finish line. You need to be, like, really dominating the MVP discussion. And Jokic really wasn't doing that. I mean, Embiid's been on his ass all year, basically. Then again, like I said earlier, you had that stretch in November where Tatum was going crazy and he was making a very good case for, a very early year case for MVP. So, I mean, and again, this is not to say that Jokic, I cannot stress to y'all, I am a huge Jokic guy. I am a big Jokic guy. I love Jokic. I love watching the Denver Nuggets because of Jokic. I'm a big Jokic fan. You can ask anybody who I talk to about sports, they will tell you I have been super Jokic over Embiid for these past 2.5 years. But it's something about Embiid after the All-Star break that it's just something. He went into another mode. Again, in the month of March, he went into another mode. And I mean, you could put Giannis's name in here too. I mean, obligatory Giannis. That's another dude that's been like, in this conversation, I guess. His name has kind of been floating around this Jokic Embiid thing for the past 3 years too. Like Giannis will have like a string of like 5 or 6 crazy games, and then everybody will be like, well, what about Giannis? What about him? Look what he's doing in it. But the conversation over the past 3 years has definitely been Jokic Embiid, and like this year it's really more the same. I mean, for what it's worth, too, Giannis has actually played the least amount of games out of these 3 guys. I think Jokic has 68, Embiid has 66, and Giannis has 63 games played, if I'm recalling that correctly. So, I mean, again, the biggest knock on Embiid for me was always he's injured all the time. He don't play. He never plays through injuries. He can't play through injuries. Jokic is better with his attendance, this, that, and third, da-da-da. But, like, if you're telling me Jokic is only going to give you 2 games over Embiid, who's playing basketball like this, like, I mean, what's 2 games? I take those 2 losses. If I get Embiid's defense plus his offensive production, I'll take the 2 losses. Obviously, once you start getting 5 games missed, 7 games missed, then 12, once you start getting into that, then obviously it does start to skew my perception of that player a bit. But, if we're only talking 2 games, Jokic is only giving me 2 more games than Embiid, I'll take the 2 losses. Joel Embiid is hard to say that he's not going to retire a top 3 big of all time. Absolutely a top 5. You could argue against top 3. He'll be a top 5 big all time when it's all said and done. And my argument, like part of my critique of Joel Embiid has always been, if he had like better attendance overall for his career, he could probably be working towards being the best big at like ever. Shaq fans are probably not gonna like that. But yeah, no, my argument against Embiid has always just been his attendance. But I mean, Jokic is only playing 2 more games than Embiid, and Jokic hasn't dominated this MVP conversation the entire year. Embiid has been playing historically great basketball on both ends of the floor. Jokic has come a ways defensively. He's not as much of a negative as he used to be on the defensive side of the floor. He's definitely, and the Nuggets have like this weird scheme that they do where they pre-switch off Jokic's guy so that, Jokic doesn't just get like picked on all day, so they help him in Denver, and he's learning, he's getting better defensively, but at the end of the day, he's still somebody that we saw a couple years ago. Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum just, they ripped Jokic apart on the perimeter. They trapped him in, they had him in pick and roll hell. And that'll always be the thing with Jokic, is he'll always be susceptible to that, the pick and roll switch. He plays in Curry's conference. Steph Curry, YouTube's right there. You can go look at Jokic getting flayed on the perimeter all day by elite guards, and like that is my whole thing this season. It's like, yeah, of course, Jokic is his analytics are bonkers. He's one of the greatest offensive engines ever. He's one of the most efficient offensive engines ever. But Embiid's only played 2 less games than Jokic, and he's been a star on, both ends of the floor. Not just for this year, for his whole career. He's been better than Jokic on that side of the ball, and he's been a star. He's been a defensive and offensive monster for his whole entire career. So it's like availability was the big thing, and dominating the MVP conversation. Those were 2 things that, Jokic had to do this year. Jokic, again, he didn't even play 70 games. And in November, people were saying that Tatum had joined the MVP conversation. So Jokic wasn't really dominating this conversation all year. He's been fighting Embiid all year. And then, I sound like a broken record, but Tatum had that stretch in November. So, I don't know if you can give, because again, these are narrative-based awards, right? Like, we could sit and parse through the numbers, and really I would prefer it to be like that. And Tim Duncan might have a Defensive Player of the Year award if they didn't just give awards off vibes. Which, yeah, by the way, if you didn't know that, Tim Duncan does not have a Defensive Player of the Year award. That is insane to me, but that's neither here nor there. yeah, if you want to sit and parse numbers all day, I mean, we could sit and parse numbers all day. We could go through VORT, box plus minus, defensive, offensive, box plus minus, on offs. And like I said, honestly, I think I'd maybe prefer it be like that over, again, dudes just getting the MVP off vibes. Dudes just getting these accolades off vibes, essentially. But yeah, it's these awards are narrative based, and I don't think Nikola Jokic has a strong enough narrative for the MVP voters to sit at that table and be like, this dude has to have the MVP this year. Like, he hasn't crafted a really strong narrative. He hasn't captured the minds and hearts of the MVP voters. And I don't even know that he is really bothered by that. Jokic is just whatever. If he wins the MVP, he'll show up for the ceremony, and obviously he'll take whatever bonus he gets from his contract. But, I'm not trying to say that Jokic is going to be pressed about this, but I think the right thing to do, like, if we're staying consistent in how we're giving people this award, I think that Joel Embiid has certainly earned, out of all 3 years that we've been having this Embiid-Jokic conversation, I definitely think that this is the year that Embiid has deserved it the most. And I mean, you've got people. I mean, Embiid's got his stands, obviously. He's got people that'll tell you the past 2 years that, he should have won it both those years, or at least one of those years he should have had it. I mean, I'm not really here to argue about that. That is what it is. That's in the past. It already happened. But this award right here, like this MVP right here, the 2022-2023 award, again, if we're shooting for consistency, because I know, all this is human design, so it's gonna be flawed. All we can really do is just shoot for perfection. We're rarely gonna hit it. So if we're shooting for consistency, if we're shooting for a perfect slate for this award, I think in the best interest of the, consistency and the, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't even think of the word I'm looking for right now. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, if we are gonna take this award seriously, like if we're gonna take the awarding of this award seriously, it should go to Embiid this year. Like, I think, and I don't think that's crazy to say. I know there are like analytics nerds that'll, try to math on me all, and it's just like, I'm not denying that he's put up, like, I would never, I am a Jokic fan. I am a huge Jokic fan. I would never, I know the analytics nerds are going to get so mad. I would never, ever deny Jokic's analytics. He has put up historically great analytics. That's his biggest argument, I would say, for his three-peat in terms of MVP is, like, he's had some of the greatest metrics ever since Michael Jordan in the middle of his second three-peat or whatever. But, like, I think in the best interest of this award, in the best interest of consistency, I think that Embiid, I think we can comfortably give this award to Embiid. If Embiid wins it and Jokic is second place and Giannis is third place, I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that we need to burn down the homes of the MVP voters. I think we can all comfortably agree that Embiid and Giannis have both been playing great basketball these past 3 years. This past season, they've been playing great basketball. I guess I'll throw Giannis' name in there too, because I'm sure Giannis has got some stands. Yeah, they've all been playing great basketball, but I think after that March that Embiid had, and in the 50-point game on Boston on a top 10 defense, I think we can comfortably give the award to Embiid. I don't think it's crazy to give Embiid the award. I could sit here again. I could sit here and parse numbers all day. But these awards, they're never, they're never consistent with numbers. I mean, if you really want to, like, what is an MVP? I feel like that's a discussion for a whole other video. Like, what should be the definition of the MVP? Is it the person who's most important to his team? Is it the best player on the best team? Is it, there's like, what are we? Personally, I hate that specific definition, the best player on the best team, because you're awarding an individual accolade for, a dude. You're basically, you should give the MVP to his whole team. It shouldn't just be his award. It should be the team's award too, if you're going with the best player on the best team argument. So that's just an argument that I hate in particular. But yeah, no, what is an MVP? It's such a vague question. There's never really an answer for it. There's some type of answer, which is why I said, like, I feel like based off what that answer has been, a lot of the times that the award has been given out, I feel like Embiid kind of fits that, like, super weird, vague criteria for what an MVP is this season specifically. Like, again, it's just about who can craft the best narrative on top of, obviously having great numbers and being in a winning situation. And, again, I feel like Embiid kind of checks all the boxes, whereas Jokic doesn't really check all his boxes and Giannis don't check all his boxes. So, yeah, I think we can finally give this award to Embiid, and we don't have to worry about, it being, like, sacrilege, or we don't need the MVP voters' houses, like, being burned down or whatever. Like, I think Embiid has done more than enough to win the award this year. Also, as just, like, kind of an aside, I think it's super cool that, especially in today's NBA, where, the game feels so, like, guard and wing oriented, and, it's almost like Dwight Howard basically just got, like, played out the league. Like, he's still a very good basketball player. He just doesn't have the skill set for today's NBA. It seems like bigs are, like, the only position that can literally just get, like, played off the floor. Like, there's no reason to just, like, if you can't defend and you can't shoot, or you can't do both of those things, like, especially if you can't do either of those things, like, why, like, you really don't belong on an NBA roster. So I feel like with the game, like, how it is today, it's super cool that not only this past season, obviously, but the past 3 years, the game this award has been centered around 2, if you want to involve Giannis, 3, because technically Giannis is like a fucking forward and he's a center and he is a forward in a center's body. That's what I was trying to say. It's cool that, this award, again, with the NBA being so guard and wing oriented, some people will even just straight up tell you, like, if you don't have a two-way wing, you just can't win. Like, even if you have, like, Jokic, if you don't have a two-way wing, like, you can't win. You just don't win. You just don't. Or if you don't have an elite point guard, like, you just don't win. You can have a Jokic, you can have an Embiid, but if you don't have like an elite wing or an elite guard, like, you just don't win championships. Your franchise doesn't go anywhere. I think, like I said, I think it's super cool that, the MVP, probably the most coveted award in this sport, we're having a conversation. It's two or three bigs essentially that have just been, like, dominating this award for the past 3-4 years, and also 5 years technically, I guess. And also, I like that it's all international guys. Yeah, Giannis is from Greece. Embiid is from, I believe Embiid is Congolese. I could be wrong about that, and I'm pretty sure that Jokic is Serbian. So I don't know. I just think, those things don't really matter, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but to me they kind of do. And I just think it's cool that, it's three international bigs that have been, again, like dominating the MVP discussion the past like half decade. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I really do think Embiid is deserving of it this year. The past 2 years, personally, I agree that Jokic has been a back-to-back MVP, especially when you take into account, like, the injuries he's had, or, the injuries he's had to deal with on his roster, and to still be able to put up those numbers those 2 years, I think it's, I don't know. But this year, I definitely think Embiid deserves it. But what do you think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Is there another guy that, I just didn't bring up that I completely forgot? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm really excited to like engage with you guys, and I want to talk to you guys, and I want to debate or flesh out each other's opinions on why we agree. And so yeah, I definitely want you to comment below with your thoughts on who you think the MVP is. And also, I really appreciate it if you could give this video a thumbs up, if you like the content, and subscribe again if you like the content. This is basically what the channel is going to be. And again, I'm really excited to just like engage with the basketball community. I think there's always potential to have like some really great discussions, and I don't know. I appreciate anybody who takes the time out their day to watch this, to listen to this. Everybody's time is so precious. So yeah, comment, like, subscribe, maybe. I appreciate you very much for listening. I hope you have a nice day.